Hi, it's Ben Grabham here with ADB. Over the next few months, we're going to be bringing you some cool setup tricks and rider tips. Today I'm going to show you how to set your bike up for riding in the desert and in the sand. Over the years, I've done a lot of desert racing, most of it in Australia. I've done all the major desert races from Fink, Hattah, Deepwell, the Tri-Series back in the day. Any desert race in Australia you can think of, I've had good success in managing to win most of them at least once, sometimes multiple times. Then I've went on to race Dakar and finished that in my first attempt. So I've learned a lot along the way. Sometimes I've learned it the hard way, but it's all in the memory. So here today we're going to show you where to start with setting your bike up. The first thing I add to the bike when setting up for the desert is these mighty Steg Pegz. They've been with me along every one of my wins. They're very important. I find they're one of the things that helps me do long distance races a little bit easier. The basic design of them is when I'm standing up, I lean into them with the back of my boot, and I can just work the back of the bike a lot better. A lot of desert racing is about getting the rear wheel onto the ground sooner. So you running the Steg Pegz, I can really lean into them, grip the bike and push the rear of the bike into the ground. It also helps me with fatigue. I can unload my arms a little bit on some of the big straights and lean into them and just relax a little bit more. So they definitely play a big part in desert racing for me. Also, when I'm setting my bike up for desert riding or racing, I look at the exhaust system, because a lot of desert riding's fast, so you're on the gas a lot and a lot of heat's trying to escape. So the basic setup there I look at is a nice sturdy exhaust system. These Acros, I've had a lot of success with them being nice and strong. And then on the other hand, what I do is normally remove, you can see I've removed the insert, the noise insert out of the back. It just opens up and lets it flow a little bit better. And in the desert, it's probably one of the few places where on a big 450 like this, I actually do chase a little bit more power, because generally in deep sand or wide open spaces, so I go for maximum power. Noise isn't normally an issue in a lot of these races, in desert races, because you're in wide open spaces, so it doesn't matter if the bike's a bit noisier. And yeah, that's why I go that way. While I'm speaking about power, another good area to look at on some of these new bikes is the mapping. The beauty on this WR450 is I can do it with my phone, so I've pre-programmed what I class as an aggressive power map. Once again, I'm chasing maximum power and aggressive power because I'm in deep sand and generally open spaces, so I can go for that power. Another reason I do go for the maximum power is there's situations where generally in the tight stuff, the more power would get me in trouble, but in the open spaces, it can actually get me out of trouble when I'm in tall gears and I need that good power response just to get from one whoop to the next. So I highly recommend working out the best power map for your bike and make sure it's nice and safe too, because a lot of desert racing does put a lot of stress on the engines. When chasing maximum power with like the power map settings on these bikes, just be careful. I see a lot of people go for the utmost power, and sometimes that is a lean setting or ignition's a bit too advanced, and you end up cooking a piston or doing something crazy over these long distance races. Like, you can go sometimes more power for some of these motocross and dirt track events, but they're not designed to last long distances. So make sure you know what you're doing and you do run a safe, powerful setting. Tyres are very important when riding in the desert. Today we're in deep sand, so we've got some soft terrain tyres on there. The sand doesn't really harm the tyres at all, so you can run quite an aggressive pattern and they work really well in the deep sand. But you've also got to keep in mind a lot of desert races, like the Fink desert race, some of the safari races that I've done over the years, you're riding a lot more desert, harsh conditions, hard pack. So you look for a longer lasting rally rear tyre. The soft terrain ones just wouldn't do the distance. It'd work okay for 10 minutes and then fall apart. So you go for a rally tyre that can do multiple days riding. Also, another good area to look at is in the desert riding, because you're doing high speeds and over bumps and rocks and that, I up my pressures quite a bit. I run at the lowest, maybe around 15. Out around Fink, it's around the 17 PSI mark, front and rear. If I have the chance, I run Moose, mainly for the puncture resistance. There's no chance of getting a puncture, but out at Fink, some people are a little bit funny with Mooses. They don't like the feel and things like that. So make sure you spend a bit of time on them before you do go out in the desert, but I do like them just for the knowing that I'm not going to get a puncture. Suspension settings for riding in the desert are very important. I've got a few basic guidelines I like to run by. Up the front end, you can see I've actually slid the forks down through to give the front taller feel. What I like to do then is, because normally a lot of the riding's high speed, it just gives me a little bit more stability. And then also on the front fork, I've sped up the rebound a little bit, so it's a little bit softer but makes the fork faster in action. What I find that does is just at the high speed follow the ground a little bit better, give me a bit more comfort through my hands, and that's sort of the basics of what I do on the front end. Moving to the rear shock, because a lot of the desert racing is high speed, I actually lower the rear end a little bit. Say a lot of the off-road riding, say I was running 110mm sag for example, I'd lower the rear to maybe 115, 118mm just to rake that front out a little bit more, get the rear a little bit lower. Helps to keep it a little bit settled at high speed, and also just gives that bike a lot of stability. And then as far as rear shock compression settings, I like it to be nice and soft and quite lively, so I speed up the rebound, soften the low speed, but then on the real big hits I still want some good strength there, so I actually go a little bit firmer on the high speed on the shock. And yeah, there's some good guidelines I like to run when riding in the desert. Steering dampeners are super important for riding in the desert. In saying that, I don't actually have one on here today. Where we're riding and events like Hatta, if you're fit and really strong, you can get away without having one, but races like Deepwell and Fink and all the ones I've done over in WA, I wouldn't even dream of lining up without one. They're super important. So do a bit of research. There's quite a few good ones out there. I've had a lot of success with 4 or 5 different steering dampeners, so have a look around, see what fits your bike well, and yeah, I highly recommend it. It's just another one like the Steggies, just to back you up. It's just, you don't need to hang on near as tight. You can play with adjustments, make it heavier or lighter. A lot of people ask me out at Fink, like, where do I have it? I actually go quite heavy with it. I'll run it to the point where it starts to feel a little bit too heavy, so then I back it off 1 or 2 clicks, and that's pretty much how I like to run them. For people that haven't rode with steering dampeners and sort of wonder how it feels and what it does on the bike, basic way of thinking about it is actually feels like having another set of arms on there that you can't see. It just makes the bike feel very stable. It makes the bike feel like it wants to go straight. So that's why we don't run them in some of the tight bush, because it actually does make the bike want to go straight too much. And then a lot of the good ones do have high and low speed settings and angle settings. So don't be afraid to play around with them and read what the manual says.